Hey, what's up, guys? So, did put out the video of the show, Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show yesterday. Went through my picks there for the NFL divisional round. However, I was doing some more research, and I thought it would be interesting to do uh, the picks and kind of talk about why I see the picks coming out the way I do, and also what Vegas is saying as far as the odds and what I think about the betting odds and taking those type of picks. So first and foremost, one of the reasons why I really believe that um, the Saints, Eagles, Cowboys are three of the strongest teams in the NFC playoffs, and I don't see the Rams getting past the divisional round is because and if they do, definitely not beating whoever makes it to the NFC Championship game. Is if you look at their records in their last few games, going into the end of the season, uh, you have the Saints with 3 wins and 1 loss, and that last loss to Carolina, pretty much in a game that was meaningless for them. I believe they rested a lot of players there. If you look at the Cowboys are coming into the playoffs out of the regular season with 3 wins and 1 loss, right? And then, or excuse me, that's the Philadelphia Eagles. But the Dallas Cowboys exactly have the same exact record coming into the playoffs, which was 3 wins and 1 loss. But if you look at the Rams, they're coming into the playoffs with 2 wins and 2 losses. The problem with their 2 wins is one was against the Arizona Cardinals, who were in complete disarray this year. The other was against the San Francisco 49ers, and it was a relatively close game. Okay, 48-32. When they lost their other 2 games, it was in week 14 and 15, both to playoff teams, the Chicago Bears and then the Philadelphia Eagles. And the games were close, and it was still when the games really mattered. It was still in part of the season where the Rams were still trying to win games to get home field advantage. You could argue that the last game of the season really didn't matter for them. Could understand why that game was close. But when they played the Bears and when they played Philadelphia, those were games that actually mattered by the end of the season as to whether or not they would get home field advantage, and they lost back to back against playoff teams. Not only did they lose against those playoff teams, but if you look at the scores, their point production was way below what it generally is. Against Chicago, they only scored 6 points. Against Philadelphia, they only scored 23 points. So what is that telling you? Against playoff defensive teams, they're not scoring the type of points that they did against lesser opponents. You take away that scoring ability from the Rams, given that their defense is really not performing that well. Okay, it really is not performing that well. It's way, way, way down when it comes to rushing defense. Giving up a lot of rush yards against either the Eagles, the Saints, or the Cowboys, that is not a recipe to win. Moving on, let's look at the AFC. You kind of have a similar thing going on there, which is why I think you see a lot of concern from fans about the Patriots, right? Is they're coming into the playoffs having, excuse me, having won 2 games and losing 2 games of their last 4. Last quarter of the season, they're a 500 football team. More concerning than that is that they lost to 2 non-playoff teams. They lost to Miami, they lost to Pittsburgh, then they beat Buffalo, and they beat the Jets. So they didn't play any playoff teams at the end of the season, yet they only went 500. So that's pretty concerning when it comes to the Patriots. When you look at San Diego has 3 wins and 1 loss. Their only loss coming to Baltimore, which was a 10-22 game, which is understandable because you didn't really have a whole lot of time to prepare for that little gimmicky thing that they were doing with Jackson. So you saw what happened last week. Once they actually had time to prepare, they knew what they were going to see. They understood. They had seen it before. What a difference that was. If we look at the Chiefs kind of have a similar thing going on coming into the season as well, or coming into the playoffs as well. They have one win against the Raiders, one win against the Ravens, which is a playoff team, and then they lost 2 games to playoff teams. They lost to the Chargers and they lost to the Seattle Seahawks. 31-38 to the Seahawks, 28-29 to the Chargers. What is that telling you? As these playoff teams are starting to gain momentum and the defenses are starting to come together, as the weather gets a little bit cooler, as that football gets a little bit harder to catch, all of a sudden, those massive numbers and points, the Chiefs are just not generating. I don't trust Andy Reid. He really hasn't been, a spectacular coach in the playoffs. I really don't like the way that he seems not to learn how to manage the clock in all of his career. It's been a thorn in his side, if you will. And while Mahomes is a really, really good quarterback, he's also young and inexperienced. So, I don't know that I think that I would put that game management into his hands. You look at the Colts, they're the only team coming into the playoffs with 4 consecutive wins, okay? 4 consecutive wins in their last quarter of the season. And then if you start looking at these betting odds, you see things like, for instance, the Colts and the Chiefs. The total, the over-under, I believe, is like 56.5 points. The Chiefs are favored by 5 points because Indianapolis is on the road. If I'm a betting person, I'm definitely taking the Colts, especially if somebody's going to give me the points on their money line. I think that the Colts are really, momentum matters. And it really does bother me that, you listen to these talking heads and they know all these things. They've seen all these things. I mean, the data is out there. You look at, what happens when teams get hot. I mean, you don't have to be the best football team. You don't have to be the best football team, but when teams start to play better and they start to get hot going into the playoffs, that's what generally gets them to win games. That's how they start building momentum to win games. Things start coming together. They start to gel. It reminds me a lot of the New York Giants versus the Patriots, right? In that Super Bowl where they had played the Patriots close in that last game, they had a really, really good end of the season. They played the Patriots really close. They had momentum. They had confidence. They came in and they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, robbing them of that perfect season, right? Well, I see a very similar thing with the Indianapolis Colts. Same with the Dallas Cowboys and, the Los Angeles Rams. You look at this game and the over-under is 48.5 points, with the Cowboys scoring 18.5 basically, and the Rams scoring 30.5 points, right? That's the predicted score. The Rams are a 7-point favorite. Well, again, if I'm a betting man, I take that. With the defense that Dallas plays, I take those points because most likely you're going to win that bet. This game will be super close. This is not a typical road game for the Dallas Cowboys. They will have probably, the advantage as far as number of fans being in the stadium. They will probably have more fans in the stadium than the Los Angeles Rams do in their own stadium. So essentially the Cowboys are looking at, a second home playoff game. And I really don't see them struggling. Everything that the Rams struggle at is what the Cowboys are good at. And everything that the Cowboys, the things that the Cowboys struggle with, the Rams are not always particularly good at. They're actually up and down, right? The Cowboys kind of struggle sometimes in coverage, but not when they blitz. When they blitz, they do pretty well. They're not the best blitzing team, but when they blitz, they have the highest sack percentage off of the blitz. Guess what? Jared Goff, he does not do well under pressure. I believe he's like 28th in the league under pressure. Okay. So I really don't see this game going the way that Vegas has it. Almost seems like to me they need people to start betting on the Dallas Cowboys just in the event that the, Rams win, because, they're going to end up having to pay out quite a bit. I think that's the only reason why the point spread is so big there. We look at the Chargers and the Patriots. Total consensus on points here is 47.5. That's the over-under. And then the spread is a 4-point spread. So New England basically, it's almost a pick-em game because usually you get 3 points simply for being at home. So Vegas is only giving them an additional point. I picked the Chargers to win this game in my picks. I'm sticking with that pick. Okay. However, I can't say that it wouldn't be fun for me to see the Cowboys versus the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I would really like to see that. I'd really like to see, Dak versus Brady. I'd really like to see Jason Garrett versus Bill Belichick. I think we're going to see, speaking of Jason Garrett, again, just how underrated a head coach and coaching staff he has there in Dallas. Next, let's go to Philadelphia, New Orleans Saints. The Saints are favored by 8 points with a total point spread, the over-under of 51.5, right? Predicted score is like 20 points for the Eagles, 26 points for New Orleans, roughly. I think that that's a relatively right-on predicted score, maybe even more. I mean, I really feel like the Saints might blow out the Eagles. It's either going to be an upset in which the Eagles keep it close and Foles gets that, fourth quarter drive to take the lead, and then, the Philadelphia defense just does just enough for them to squeak out of there with a win, or it's going to be a complete domination. That's what I see. I mean, the Saints are at home. They're motivated. They had their one, really bad matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. So, I really don't see them just coming apart. I really think that the Saints are going to take it to them. I think that the Saints are actually going to score somewhere in the 30s. I think Philadelphia only scores about 17 to 21 points. I think it's a domination. So if I was a betting man, I would definitely take the New Orleans Saints giving up the points. I would even take the over, right? Rather than 51 points and taking the under, I would go ahead and take the over here. I think you're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 total points. When it comes to Chargers and New England, I forgot to say who I would pick there as far as betting. With the points, I think it's a really good bet to take the Chargers. I think they're going to upset New England anyway. But if somebody's going to give you 4 points when the roster clearly favors the Chargers, when New England is coming in 2-2 from the last 4 games and having lost against non-playoff teams, I just don't think that that's a good, it's not a good sign. And I know it's Brady and I know it's Belichick, but it's just, man, I mean, how long can they continue to overcome the odds? I mean, I just don't know. Can, 40-something-year-old Brady overcome the odds again with, the limited weapons that he has? I just don't think so. I don't see it happening. And Brady really hasn't been as good as he's been in the past against pressure. So I just don't see that happening. Now, like I said, I would love for them to pull it out in the sense that if my Cowboys can make it to the Super Bowl, I'd love to see them face New England just because I think it'd be, an interesting storyline. I think it'd be the absolute best storyline we could get for the Super Bowl. But, I just don't think it's going to happen. All right, guys. Well, that's all I have. That's what I wanted to talk about really quick before we get into the divisional rounds today. Hopefully you enjoy the games. I know I will. Take it easy on the adult beverages. Remember, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose.